All right, I know Mr. Van Manen has a question on this as well. So, Mr. Van Manen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your opening comments, Mr. Longo, and the long discussion on this matter of fees for advisors. What strikes me is that, in reality, from your answers today, it appears to me that you've not even thought about the impact of this process on small business. You've just gone, this is the model, this is what we're going to apply, and we really don't care as long as we get paid what we get paid, irrespective of where the cost has come from, which to me is extraordinarily disappointing, given that in part your role is to, especially now with your new statement of intent, facilitate economic activity. And I well understand the frustration of the advisor sector, particularly small to medium businesses, where they're paying for the sins of the big four banks and AMP. Now, you haven't even thought about how, when you recover these costs, and I think the figure that I've seen the last few days is nearly $30 million from Westpac and AMP and NAB alone, but others along the way, of how you can appropriately apportion that to the relevant players in the industry, just strikes me as poor accounting and poor management. I would like a detailed breakdown of what the costs incurred by the various sectors of the industry, from the top tier, mid-tier and small tier financial planning firms, and how your cost breakdown applies to all of those three sectors, and then a comparison of that to what you're actually charging those various sectors through a single levy right across the industry. Because I suspect the small to medium businesses in the sector are paying proportionately more, I suspect significantly proportionately more than the big end of town. And if you can get that to us, that would be greatly appreciated, because I think you've got to do some more work as an organisation on actually charging the fees to where they belong.
Yes. We take the issues you've raised very seriously, but can I just start by saying that the scheme that we're operating under is actually legislatively mandated. So the way we're funded, we get an allocation from Parliament, and then the fees, the levies that we collect from industry, we do that on behalf of the Commonwealth, and those funds go straight to the Commonwealth. So the legislative regime and the cost recovery we're operating under is actually legislated. So I don't want to suggest for a second that we're not very alive to the concerns being raised by financial advisors, and indeed they're not alone. The auditors have also had concerns over the last couple of years in other industry sectors about the equity or fairness of the system of cost recovery that we're operating under at the moment. And I think, as the earlier discussion showed, there's some very fundamental sort of philosophical or policy questions that underpin what we have at the moment. As to your specific questions, the scheme we're operating under at the moment is actually largely mandated by law and regulation. So there's no definition, for example, of a small business enterprise. The sectoral definitions we're using are all prescribed by regulation. And that doesn't mean people don't have a lot of questions about how the system works and how they got the levy invoices they got. And we're very conscious of the need to be as transparent as we can be, so that people see, why they're getting the levy notices they're getting and how they were calculated. We try to go to some extent to explain that in the document that Warren and the chair were talking about earlier. and we're quite open to doing whatever we can to explain further how those allocations are calculated. So this is my general remarks. I don't know whether Warren or Danielle, these are issues we've been grappling with for some time. I don't know whether you can add to that response in a way that might be helpful.
Well, before you do, thanks, Mr. Longo, for that. But my concern is that when funds are recovered, there is no offset against those fees. Now, I know you've explained that at length, and Mr. Day's also explained that at length, but that the funds go back into consolidated revenue. But surely through some accounting methodology, that can be accounted for in the assessment of those fees. I can't, for the life of me, understand why that's not the case. Well, maybe you can explain that to me in better detail than I can presently understand, but it makes no sense to me at all.
I think the easiest way to explain that, Mr. Van Manen, is that, as I said, that's the model that's set out in the law. And if you're concerned about the way that model plays out and its basis in the law, then my response to you would be that is clearly something, when you have Treasury next before you, you should raise with them, because it's really the matter for government about how they set that. But as Deputy Chair Court indicated, at some other point, maybe a longer discussion about also, what the nature of the incentives and the hazards involved in that might assist as well. I think the thing I would like to just back up on is to say, and I hear what you said about disappointment. I mean, at the end of the day, we can provide hardship relief, as you know, and we've discussed this with you before. If there are members of the sector that are having trouble, and we have done that and continue to do that. But outside of that, our responsibility is to ensure that we issue, those levies as required by the law. So, please don't take it from that we have, little interest or care about the plight of small business about that. I think that's far from it. But it's not, it's the way the law, applies that model that we are required to do. I'll hand to Commissioner Perez. No.
So on that note, therefore, what representations have you made to government from a policy perspective to say, well, this system doesn't appear to be working for these reasons, given our experience in this space and the feedback we're getting from industry? So what, if any, discussions have you as ASIC proactively had with government and with Treasury to say this model needs to be rejigged legislatively because it's not working for all of the participants in the industry?
Yeah. Can I jump in there? I'd like to ask Danielle Press to comment on the very thing you're raising, Mr. Van Manen. And the other thing I would note, and I'm pretty sure this is correct, is that there is going to be a review of this cost recovery regime sometime next year, which I think will probably be led by Treasury. But the issues you're raising, they're very much on our minds. But as things stand, the government policy favours or certainly supports the current regime. Danielle, can I ask you to...
But just before you do that, I'm not sure that you actually answered the question there, Mr. Longo.
No.
Well, I think I did. There's going to be a review of this system next year, and we do go back to fundamental policy issues. So on this one, is it user pays? So are we going to live under...
The question is that you haven't recognised there's an issue, or if you have recognised there's an issue, you haven't proactively as an organisation gone back to government and said, I think we need to look at this and maybe change this, other than the reliance on the fact that there's now a review happening next year.
Yeah, no, I think
this issue's been 2 or 3 years in the making.
To interject there, Mr. Van Manen, that's not correct. In recent months, over the last years, ASIC has written to representatives from the finance industry, from the accounting body representatives on the issues they've raised, and which are exactly the same way they've been raising it with you. We have an ongoing dialogue with Treasury and the government about the nature of the industry funding model. And all of these things are raised, at all meetings when we talk about the industry funding model, about the feedback we're getting from our stakeholders and from those industry representatives. So to say that there's not a dialogue about that is not true. And that is a constant conversation that has been going on since the imposition of the model. We do provide that feedback, and we do provide our view about how the model's working and how it's being received by industry.
I'm just conscious of the time, Mr. Van Manen, and I'm also conscious of the fact that the question that you originally posed to ASIC members around you wanted a detailed breakdown on the costs incurred by large, mid and small businesses, financial advisor businesses for their levies. Given that the answer from the chair is that there's no definitional differentiation between a large, a mid and a small, do you want to ask the question or perhaps even put it on notice in writing and put some parameters around that yourself?
Well, quickly I'll rephrase it.
Just before you do that, Mr. Van Manen, Mr. Longo just wants to add something.
Yeah, we'll do whatever we can. Happy to take it on notice. I know in the existing, there is some material with Secretariat where we go into some detail on aspects of these questions, Chair, and I'm quite happy to take additional questions from Mr. Van Manen and provide whatever additional transparency or confirming transparency about how these levies are calculated by reference to the advisors.
I don't think that's the question, Mr. Longo. I think the question is more, we know how the calculations are enshrined in the legislation. You've been very clear on that, and both in your oral testimony and in your written testimony. That's not the question I think that Mr. Van Manen is asking you. I think what Mr. Van Manen is asking you is what is the breakdown in the dollar value that the large, the mid and the smaller players are actually paying. Have I got that right, Mr. Van Manen?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And look, happy for you to take that on notice, and maybe I'll qualify it a little bit more, and you can take both of these final ones on notice for the sake of time. Mr. Day, in your original comments, you referred to, as part of the overall cost, the cost of enforcement and investigation of advisors in the ordinary course of business. Now, I accept that. I'd be interested to know, and I don't have a copy of your CRIS document in front of me, but do you in that break down the actual cost of those enforcement activities separate from the stuff you're doing with the Royal Commission recommendations, etc.? So I'd be interested to know what the cost of that actual day-to-day enforcement activity is. And I'll also be interested to know why there's not penalties or other fees attached to that go towards cost recovery. And finally, I think from memory, the indicative figure for the fees is about $3,104, something like that. Again, I don't have it exactly in front of me. And that's based on the current number of advisors on the register. When you issue the invoices in January, will that be based on the number of advisors on the register at the end of December? And if so, that's going to be a lower amount than currently. Have you got an idea of what the fee will actually be rather than what you've indicated that it currently is? Happy for you to take those on notice in the interest of time, Chair.
Thanks very much, Mr. Van Manen.
And Chair, if I may ask Danielle Press, who does a lot of the heavy lifting on behalf of the Commission of Industry on this very topic, just as a couple of observations, we will definitely be coming back to the committee with those questions on notice.
Ms. Press.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Van Manen, I think to say we don't think about small business is not accurate. We think about the impact on small business every day. And I raise this almost every day. And every time we take an action, we think about what the impact is going to be. So please don't think that just because the numbers are going up means we don't care. I care deeply about this, and I think about it almost every day. We've been raising it with government a lot in our conversations, both directly and indirectly. And I agree with you, it is an issue, but we need to resolve the issue in a way that is actually compliant with the law.
All right, thank you. I believe Senator O'Neill, in the interests of time, would like to put a question on notice on this topic as well. Senator O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, if I can, Chair. So I'm just trying to summarise this so I'm clear, and my question will just come at the end. Based on what I've heard, because we've been discussing this for 3 years, my question goes to the statement of intent it's been advanced today. There's an articulation in it that there's been coordinated with Mr. Frydenberg, and that you will seek to minimise the cost of regulatory interactions with ASIC, as well as exercise ASIC's regulatory relief powers where responsible. I want to know why the remedy for this problem for so many small businesses that are right across the country has not been embedded as an action for now and is waiting for review later on. I'd also like to understand, if possible, perhaps somebody could just give me a quick answer straight away of when was the legislation that you're referring to and the regulation that is causing this problem implemented? What year?
3 years ago.
So in 2018?
Yeah, I stand to be corrected, but I think it was 3 years ago.
Okay. So in 2018, the current government, and I think Mr. Frydenberg was the Treasurer at that time, so the current government implemented the scheme that you are administering. Mr. Day, you've made it clear in your evidence this morning, you are administering it within the guidelines as they are established by the government. You've also made it clear that you've made multiple submissions to Treasury and to the government directly to make changes. So the question I have...
to be fair, Senator O'Neill, I'm not sure that was the evidence that they gave, that they have made multiple... I'm happy to stand corrected on that, but I'm not sure that that was their evidence that they'd made multiple submissions to government to make changes.
I believe Mr. Day said exactly that there's been ongoing conversations with Treasury. Mr. Day, I don't want to verbal you, so please correct me. Did you say that you had multiple conversations with Treasury and government about this matter?
I say we have constant and ongoing discussions about the model and the feedback we get. I didn't put it any higher than that, I think is my recollection, Senator.
Well,
thank you. Nonetheless, that's very good. You are
well, they're two different things, Senator O'Neill. To be fair, that's how you've just characterised the response from Mr. Day was not what Mr. Day said. So I just want that to be on the record. So my question, I
guess, is given that ongoing conversation of the kind that Mr. Day has expressed, right, which happens very regularly, you have to assume that the government knows that this is a problem. It's known it's been for 3 years since it implemented the legislation. So my question is, could the ASIC provide to this committee any of the ongoing work of modelling of alternatives to the current structure that they have undertaken so far and advanced in any way with Treasury or the Treasurer?
Take that on notice, Chair.
That's it. Thank you very, very much. Because I know these businesses are sick and tired of asking for assistance and not getting it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I think we'll leave that topic now. If everybody, my colleagues, are done on the issue of Levy.